What's up, fellow flight simmers? Welcome to this edition of Father-Son Flight Simulator. Today we are going to be highlighting the Hot Start TBM-900. At the time of this video, we're currently on version 1.1.8, and in this version there was quite a few updates to the plane to make it more VR accessible. You can now access all of the menu items that you were able to access only in 2D, now in the 3D environment. You can see I'm scrolling through the maintenance as part of my pre-flight checklist to make sure everything is good and ready to go. Now this plane really is near or at study level, so you're going to have to be on your game here. There's quite a learning curve to learning how to fly this plane. You have to be very procedurally accurate, otherwise you will cause damage to some of these components that we're looking at right now. It's one of the things I really like about this plane. It's a challenge, and the level of immersion that you get from doing all of this is quite substantial. It's excellently done. Now, another thing I really like about this plane is the way you can do a walk around. You can actually interact with the plane from the outside. Now, I just hooked up the GPU, ground power unit, and providing power to the plane now. I can also walk around and manually remove the static elements, even though I could still do this from the payload manager menu, which I have access to also in VR. It does add sort of a level of immersion to be able to walk around the plane, remove the chocks by clicking on them, pointing at them. Really adds quite a lot to the experience. Lately I've been flying on PilotEdge, and I gotta say I've been loving it. The CAT ratings, the I ratings, and the Sky High challenges have all been great fun and great learning. Today we're going to be doing the deadhead between Sky High Challenge 4 and Sky High Challenge 5, which is Palo Alto to the Dalles Municipal Airport. That will give us the ODP departure from the Palo Alto Airport straight to San Jose VOR. We'll take the Victor Airway 334 to Sacramento, then a straight shot GPS to the Deschutes VOR, and then Victor 25 to Cucta. Once we're at Cucta, we'll be flying the GPS Alpha approach for the airport. So as I prep the plane for the flight, keep in mind this is a 2.5-hour flight, and therefore I'm going to edit it down substantially for the video. My mic calls to ATC are pretty quiet, unfortunately. I didn't anticipate me narrating anything during the flight because I wanted to focus on the ATC. I ended up turning the mic down a little too far, and you really can't hear the calls. However, this will be a full walkthrough of the flight, and I will highlight the important things. So if you're having some trouble with this plane, or if you're having a steep learning curve like I did, maybe this video will help you out. We'll start by raising the crash bar, which will put the plane into low power mode. Then we'll turn on the GPU switch, and that will bring the power up the rest of the way. We'll give the plane a moment to boot up.
Aural warning, okay.
With the plane booted up, the first thing I'm going to check is that I've entered the flight plan correctly. Now evidently I've already entered the flight plan before this flight, but this is the first time that I've used the Victor Airway load up. Now to do that, you have to put in the starting point, then you have to load up the airway, and then specify the end point of the airway. And I do this twice. I do this for the beginning leg for Victor Airway 334 and the last bit leg, which was Victor 25. And I go through and I make sure everything is correct, and that the flight plan is correct in the GPS. One thing really cool about the avionics of the TBM-900 is that I can bring up the airport diagram or the approach plates directly in the MFD. And that's really handy to have. It helps you brief for the approaches before you get there, and you could just examine them and figure out where you are, and it gives you a good map of where the taxiways are, and that's really helpful when you're getting instructions for taxi from ATC. Before we get started, I'm going to pull up the payload manager. I'm just going to use it to make sure that I have enough fuel for the flight, and also that I've removed all of the static elements. I'm also going to check my takeoff and landing weight, make sure they're in envelope. Today's flight is just me. It's a deadhead flight, so it's about 210 pounds for for myself and luggage, and just fuel. So that's all it's going to be needed for today's flight. Just checking ATIS before I call for clearance. Palo Alto is not supported on the PilotEdge network, so it treats it as if the tower is closed, which means I got to call center, and I'll probably be given a hold for release instruction.
Advise on initial contact. You have
November 714 Tango Whiskey, Oakland Center, clear to the Dalles Airport as filed. Climb and maintain flight level 190. Departure frequency is NorCal 121.3, squawk 7217, hold for release.
TBM-900 Tango Whiskey is cleared to the Dalles Airport, altitude 19,000, departure frequency 121.3, squawk 7217, hold for release.
November 4 Tango Whiskey, readback is correct. Advise on my frequency holding, short number 1 ready for departure.
Roger, we need to start up, we'll advise when ready. So now that we've gotten our clearance, I'm going to be putting the transponder code into the computer and putting it in alt mode. Then I'll be going through the checklist that is in the computer and following that for startup. I highly recommend you do this. The tutorial is not fully complete that they give you on the plane when you first start it up. It's a quick and dirty, but it's good to go through the full procedure. And once you familiarize yourself where all the switches are in the cockpit, it's really quite easy to follow the checklist. If I'm starting on GPU power, I always like to remove the GPU before bringing up the plane to flight idle. It's just respectful to the guys working on the ground, and I've done that job before, and I can tell you that the location of where this GPU plugs in and the proximity to the prop, it's very unnerving when you have a spinning prop there and have to unplug the GPU from the plane. So I recommend you do that before you power up to flight idle. You can see as I go through the checklist that the number of CAS warning lights or messages in the ECAS system is going down, and that should be what should happen. I should be left at the very end only with the inertial separator highlighted on. And I'm getting ECAS lights going off as I'm going through the checklist, which is a good sign that I'm doing it correctly. The inertial separator is there to protect the engine from foreign object debris entering the intake. It's good to have this on while you're on the ground and when you're flying at low altitudes, just in case. And just remember though, when you do, you're going to have a substantial drop in power, and then when you turn it off in the air, you're going to have a substantial increase in power. So you got to keep your eye on the power when you're turning it on and off. Okay, we're ready for taxi. The only thing showing up in the ECAS is the inertial separator. As we taxi, we're going to be doing our flight control checks and setting flaps for takeoff. We'll soon be contacting ATC, letting them know that we're good for hold release and ready to fly. As I taxi, I'm going to be pulling the throttle back into the taxi range, which will give us a nice, easy, slow taxi to the runway. And all I gotta say is it's pretty exciting doing this in VR and being ready for takeoff, talking to ATC. The amount of immersion and realism that I'm having right now is quite incredible, and it feels almost like the real thing. Now, I know it's not the real thing, but for a home simulator, this is about as good as it gets. continuing to follow the before takeoff checklist, doing my run-up and feathering. It's about time that I call ATC and let them know I'm ready for hold release and get up in the air. Oakland Center, TBM-900 Tango Whiskey is ready for release.
November 714 Whiskey, time 1514 and 3/4 release for departure. And clearance to avoid lifting off by 1519, frequency change approved.
Roger, we'll come back for not off in 5 minutes. Frequency change approved to volume air. Traffic, TBM-9 taking the active runway 31 for takeoff and departure to the south. One note about takeoffs in this plane: it is really hard to control on the ground, particularly during takeoff. And that's because the prop wash is hitting that tail and it's driving you off course. Make sure you set the trims correctly for takeoff and you gently power up very slowly, and you pull up right when you get to the takeoff speed. Traffic, TBM-9 is taking off runway 31. That's probably one of the better takeoffs I've had in the TBM. You notice as soon as I left the ground, that yaw just went right up to the left. That's because the wheels off the ground were no longer holding it stable, and that prop wash hitting that tail really bounces it around. It's best to get into establishing the climb as soon as possible. For the obstacle departure procedure at Palo Alto, it's basically just a climbing right turn to the San Jose VOR. I'm not going to call ATC and let them know I'm off the ground until I'm confident that I'm well established in the flight. Oakland Center, TBM-900 Tango Whiskey off the ground, 5,000 for 19.
November 714 Whiskey, NorCal departure, ident.
4 Tango Whiskey, ident.
November 14 Whiskey is ready to contact 7 miles northwest of the San Jose VOR. Altitude indicates passing 5,900, altimeter 3018, proceed on course.
Proceed on course, 4 Tango Whiskey. up till now, I've been hand flying the TBM-900, but once I get on the Victor airway, I'm going to put it over into autopilot and make sure that I climb the rest of the way via the autopilot. Now, this is just because once you're in a plane like this, the high performance nature of it, you really do need to do this to minimize your workload in the plane. And the GPS does a lot of that work for you if you've done all the planning that you need to do. With the autopilot on, it frees me to think about power and power management. It may not look like I'm doing much, but believe me, I'm checking the gauges, I'm making sure that the course is being flown, I'm checking my wind correction angle, I'm checking all of these things to make sure that the autopilot is functioning properly. But at the same time, I can focus on the issues and I can listen more intently for ATC instructions. And part of that engine power management is making sure that I turn off the inertial separator now that I'm at good altitude. The inertial separator, when I turn it off, I'm going to have to be careful because it's going to increase the power over the time, and I don't want to go over red line.
November 4, Tango Whiskey, climb and maintain flight level 200, contact Oakland Center 132.2, 32.2.
32.2, clear to flight level 20. Oakland Center, TBM-900 Tango Whiskey is climbing to flight level 20.
714 Tango Whiskey, Oakland Center, Roger. Just confirm, make sure in the future flight level 200, and it's climb and maintain, not cleared to. I heard cleared to on the previous transmission.
Thank you. Flight level 200, climb to 200. Thank you. And right there is the true power of using PilotEdge. I didn't mind being corrected by the ATC. In fact, I welcome it. It's fine to be corrected once in a while, and it really gives you good feedback that you're doing things wrong and to change your habits when you're talking to them. The plane is really beautiful, both inside and out. Hot Start really did a great job on the TBM-900, and it's a real joy to fly.
Southwest 35, you can contact departure. Southwest 170, contact NorCal departure. November 4 Tango Whiskey, contact Seattle Center 121.4.
121.4 for TBM-900.
One 73 NorCal departure, ready to contact, climb and maintain flight level 190.
Seattle Center, TBM-714 Tango Whiskey, flight level 200.
November 714 Tango Whiskey, Seattle Center, good afternoon. Correction, good morning. Yeah, 2215 San Francisco, ground squawk mode Charlie, runway 1 left, taxi via Alpha, Mike 1.
So you can see now I'm going to bring up the GPS Alpha approach into the Dalles airport. That's one of the cool things about this MFD. I can actually bring that up. I do have the Avitab as a backup, but I just think it's really cool to put that right there on the navigation screen. The approach takes me in from Kukta over to the initial approach fix. I don't have to do that procedural turn. I can just go straight in. And one thing I'm going to have to do is watch my altitudes. I'm all the way at flight level 200. I have a pretty far way to go once I get past the VOR waypoint. It's not going to be long before I get to the Kukta intersection, but I'm marred because the Victor airway is still pretty high from where I need to be. I'm going to have to coordinate my descent pretty closely with ATC.
November 4 Tango Whiskey, then you have the weather at the Dalles and your approach request.
Seattle Center, TBM-900 Tango Whiskey. We're unable to pick up the AWAS over there, but we have the retard report and the current altimeter, and these guys are clear in this column. So we like the GPS Alpha into the Dalles.
November 4 Tango Whiskey, roger. Clear direct to Kukti and expect the approach from Kukti.
Roger, expect a result from Kukti, and upon passing the Deschutes VOR, we request descent to 8,000.
November 4 Tango Whiskey, approved as requested. Descend to pilot's discretion, maintain 8,000.
7-4 Tango Whiskey is okay down to 8,000.
Two Papa Kilo, thanks. November 4 Tango Whiskey, cancel that descent instruction. Descend to pilot's discretion to maintain 13,000. I'll get you 8,000 as soon as you're out of the MVAs.
Roger, 13,000 until we're out of the. Now I thought that instruction to descend to 8,000 was a little odd. I wasn't even on the airway yet, and the minimum vectoring altitude was around 13,000 feet. So this is why he changed this instruction and only allowed me to go down to 13,000 feet instead of the 8,000 that I wanted. The next waypoint is Kukta. It's time to activate the approach. I'm fully expecting ATC to clear me for the approach since that's what I've requested, and he's told me to expect it. In Seattle Center, TBM-900 Whiskey, just confirming we're down to 8,000.
November 4 Tango Whiskey, literally crossed the boundary into the lower MVA. Cross Kukti at or above 8,000. At Kukti, you're clear the RNAV GPS Alpha approach.
Roger, clear to descend 8,000, cleared for the approach at Kukti. I'm cleared to follow the approach, so as soon as I get to Cukti, I'm going to start and descend via the procedure. I don't have to wait for him to tell me what the altitudes will be because he has already cleared me for the full procedure. Now, the Dalles airport is a non-controlled airport, so at some point he's going to have to release me to the Unicom frequency so that I can announce my arrival to the traffic there. As I'm descending, I'm constantly watching my speed to make sure I can slow down well enough to lower the gear. It's not going to be long now before I'm on the final approach, so I have to manage the speed very closely as I'm managing a pretty steep descent.
November 4, Tango Whiskey, note to between you and the airfield radio services are terminated. Report cancellation of IFAR in the air by frequency on the ground at 122.2. Frequency change approved.
Frequency change approved. Report on the ground.
Getting slow.
When I turned on the inertial separator, I had a sharp drop in power, and that slowed me down quite a bit more than I thought I was going to slow down, so I need to add power back in to make up for the loss. Now I'm nearing the final approach fix, and it's time to announce my intentions to local traffic. Dalles Airport, TBM-9 is on approach for RNAV A, RNAV Alpha for my 3 Dalles Airport.
Delta 1194, Texelic approach 135.5.
135.
The GPS Alpha doesn't line me up to any of the runways. It just basically points me to the center of the airport. So I'm going to have to be very cognizant about making a modified base to final for landing. As I pass over the final approach fix, it's time to lower the gear and turn off the autopilot and yaw dampener. As I approach minimum altitude, I'm looking intently for the airport, and I'm also going to add flaps. Dalles Airport, TBM-900 is on final approach. I now see the airport is just over the other side of the river, and I can see the orientation to runway 31, which is just off to the left a little bit. I will begin my turn to modified base final. The landing speed on this airplane is roughly 80 knots, and if you keep it right around 80 knots, your chances of a good landing are pretty high.
Sync rate. Sync rate. Sync rate. 500. Airspeed.
I'm pretty happy with this landing, although I did get a little bit slow there right at the tail end. It was a good touchdown, and the plane didn't land hard at all. traffic, TBM-900 whiskey, we're off and away from. As I park, I'm going to go through the checklist and make sure I shut down the plane properly and ready for the next time I approach it. Also, I'm going to let ATC know that I've made it onto the ground safely and cancel IFR.
JetBlue 210, Oakland Center, Roger. Descend me the Surfer 3 arrival, San Francisco, altimeter 3017.
Seattle Center, TBM-714 whiskey, safely on the ground at the Dalles, cancel IFR.
November 71 Tango Whiskey, IFR cancellation received. Good day.
So as I go through the shutdown procedure, I'm going to give you some closing thoughts on the Hot Start TBM-900. I admit I'd heard that this plane was really great from some fellow flight simmers. They were saying things like, this plane is awesome, it's great for VR, it is on another level. But I admit at the $65 price tag, that seemed fairly steep to me, even for a GA plane, and it really held me off for a long time in buying the plane. However, now that I have the plane, I can say that I'm really impressed. The level of detail, the modeling of the systems, the maintenance module that tracks how much things cost when you break them, they really made me want to pay attention to doing things right and following the procedures and actually learning the procedures. In fact, I even downloaded the actual pilot's operating handbook just so I can learn the plane a little better and figure out how to maximize my use of it. In real life, the TBM-900 is a highly regarded turboprop plane, and having flown Hot Start's TBM-900, it's really easy to see why. I've really grown attached to this plane and I have a real good appreciation for it. VR users will find that the TBM-900 is excellent. You can go do a walk around, you can remove the static elements by walking around and clicking on them. You have full menu access and controls in the VR environment. The control schemes are excellent, and the tutorials you can be done in VR as well. I would say this is probably one of the most feature-complete VR aircraft you can get, and VR users will find that as a breath of fresh air. The developers also continue to provide excellent support for this plane. In the 2 weeks since I've owned it, there have already been 2 updates, and those updates have been pretty substantial, particularly for VR users. There's access to them through their Discord server, they're eager to hear feedback, and they're very responsive. I appreciate this with this plane. The plane itself is highly versatile and has a wide range of uses. I can fly it slow when I want to be, I can also fly it fast when I need it to be. Its carrying capacity is very good, and its range for its size is quite excellent. This plane is fast becoming one of my go-to all-purpose planes for X-Plane. I can't recommend it enough. This is an excellent buy, and if you're on the fence of buying this plane, I would take the plunge. I highly recommend it. The plane also features a save state, so the way I leave the plane is important to what I'm going to find the next time I load it up. It's important that you shut down properly and stow things and park things properly so that it's ready for you when you come back to it. I want the plane in tip-top shape when I get ready to do the next Sky High challenge. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Father-Son Flight Simulator, and if you're on the fence for the TBM-900, I think it's time to take that plunge. Again, we'll see you next time on Father-Son Flight Simulator. And until next time, have a great day.